guys, and welcome back. Today we're just jumping in on this digital sketch that I'm working on. And as always, I'm working in Photoshop if you're curious, and I use a Wacom Cintiq 13 HD. And yeah, I wanted to do something that felt kind of like a rainy day piece. And that was what triggered this piece a little bit, and it started off with me finding reference and looking up different imagery that related to that. And like it usually goes when I'm looking up something that's specific to a feeling or a concept that's pretty loose, I usually end up a little bit farther away from the original concept. And this one is a lot more like that as well. When I first imagined working on a piece that was very rainy day inspired, I pictured more of the window with rain coming in and hitting the window, and you'd see it dripping down and having these droplets of water on it. And as I worked on this piece, it turned out to be a lot more of a dark palette and not as much with the rain as I thought it would be, which is okay because it was something that I tried a few quick little takes on and I just wasn't feeling it. So I ended up continuing it in a slightly different direction. And I like sketching this way. I actually find that these give me a lot of clarity as far as what I'm interested in at that moment. And it helps me to push into a direction that I don't normally think about, at least. And this one is not groundbreaking at all, but it was definitely really fun to work on. And I like that it was a little bit more in between, having some hard edges, but also being a little bit more quote unquote painterly. I am trying to find the balance with that and getting a little bit better with being loose with my digital sketches. And I think that really is the fine line for me between being very sharp and clean with my lines, well, with the brush strokes that I'm using, and then something that is a lot more painterly and blended out. And I think that when it comes to digital, you really have to find a balance between the two, because if everything is really soft and blown out and it doesn't have any hard edges, it looks really unsharp. It looks in a way that I don't really want to go with. I want to have these sharp edges that really give that piece a little bit more grounds. And that is something that I am still finding a way that I want to incorporate it into the way that I work. So this is, again, just a process that I'm trying to figure out. It's pretty similar in a lot of ways to many of my other sketches where I'm trying to be a little bit looser. And I think to really capture that skill, I need to start actually studying works of art that is made the way that I want to. And I need to actually do more of an academic approach to it than simply sitting down and sketching it out. But overall, the fact that I'm trying to be more aware of it and I'm trying to incorporate a little bit more and infuse it into the way that I'm working certainly helps, I think. And another thing that I actually kind of struggle with when it comes to working on digital pieces like this, where it's more built up and it's a process and less concretely figured out from the beginning like it is when I'm doing a very heavily line worked piece, is that I have a hard time knowing when the point to stop blending or to stop adding on top of it is. I think that I get a little bit too narrow viewed on it and I'm not looking at the full piece as much. So I'm trying to get better at that. I think this one I did push it past my favorite part. And I think my favorite part is pretty much right now, where I haven't over blended her face and I haven't added any overly diffuse shadows in a way that I think just ends up dirtying up her face rather than adding really accurate looking shadows. So that is one thing that I would really like to get better at, but having these videos and rewatching them and thinking through them has been a huge help. Where when I used to, I would just produce a piece and then I'd look at the end and I didn't know the process that I got from one point to the next. I didn't remember what point was the right point. So this is actually an incredibly helpful tool to be able to go back and see that was the point that I liked it the most. And what did I do to it that took it away from that point? And why did I make those decisions at that time? And I think all of those things are helpful when it comes to getting better at that. So I know that I went in and I tried to add these more diffuse shadows so that it would have more of a realistic painted look. But I was not being accurate with the shadows and I was letting it get a little bit too muddied out, I guess, where it just ended up looking more like past sketch layers rather than a clear shadow. So I know that my reasoning behind it was that I wanted to add more depth to it, but I wasn't doing it accurately enough for it to actually look that way. And now that I know that that's kind of what I was thinking at that point, and that's what led me a little bit astray, that helps me to be more aware of it when it comes to me sketching again. When I'm starting to have those similar thoughts, I can take a minute and think, okay, are these accurate thoughts? Are they things that are taking me in the correct direction, or are they things that are correct, but I'm not actually implementing those thoughts well enough? So I think that I'm going to get better at being more analytical about what I'm thinking in each process without jumping ahead and just diving in with what I thought, because I think that when it comes to digital, I forget how it can become permanent. It has this feeling that I can endlessly manipulate it, and I can, but there are often times where I wish that I could go back to an earlier step, and there's only so much memory that's saved in the history, so I can't always go back to that earlier step that I really liked. So to a much greater degree, I'm able to play with it and fix it than I am with my traditional stuff, but there is still a limit to how far back I can go and how much I can undo. So I would like to practice being more thoughtful, even in my digital pieces. And I think that that is something that I've gotten better at as far as my watercolors, since it's really forced me to think through each step that I'm taking. But it isn't something that I am as thoughtful about when it comes to digital, and I want to be. And I do want to point out that even though I'm being very aware of these concrete things that I wish that I could have done better, I do not feel negatively overall over this piece. I feel like I've grown and I've gotten better at it, and I enjoyed the process a lot of painting her. And I think that sometimes that's a thing that at least I know I've experienced at the beginning that can feel hard, is when you start being more aware of self-criticism and the need for it, and ultimately enacting that a little bit more. Sometimes it can feel like when you're categorically thinking of these things that are wrong with a piece, that it begins feeling like that piece is a failure, or that you're unhappy with that piece. And I find it actually really helpful when I am thinking about each step that I could have done better. It helps me move past that piece and move past those mistakes and really internalize them into the point that it is a benefit. That was something that I'm glad I did, because now I know better. And it helps me to overall feel much more positive about a piece than, say, if I subconsciously knew there were problems with it, but I just couldn't quite place it. So overall, I just felt kind of irritated with the piece. So if you're starting off trying to be a lot more self-critical about your work so that you can get better, it can feel like you're being overly negative to yourself. But I think that it's just something that you start getting used to, putting those thoughts into the right mindset, remembering that those are all positive things, that helps you move on into a better piece with the next one. And for this piece, I use several textures that I have the rights for layered on top of each other. And this is one thing that I love doing with digital pieces, that it gives it a lot more organic quality to it, and it's a lot more interesting. And I love building up working on these textures, because it feels a little bit more almost like I'm working on really sketchy rough paper. And it helps when you're just starting off with digital, or really anytime, because I struggle with this, where you look at a blank canvas and it just looks so sterile. Adding these textures really helps it. Kind of like when people recommend that if you're working in a new sketchbook and you look at that piece and it just looks way too blank and this big imposing white space, to just put marks on it or color it with watercolor or do whatever it takes to put something down so that you're no longer working on a white blank piece of paper. So I like to transfer that over to when I'm working digitally. So if you're just starting off and you're feeling really intimidated by the canvas that you're working on, go find some textures that you can use and just throw them on there. I usually like to experiment with what the layer mode is that I use for them. Sometimes I use multiply if I want it to be darker, and I use overlay if I want it to be more of a lighter thing. And it really is a fun thing to just experiment and see how it affects not only the base canvas, but also whatever is below it. And for this one, I use several building up below to add a little bit more texture to what I was sketching on top of. And over time, I started adding a couple more at the very top so that it would influence the sketches and the inking and all of the painting that was happening underneath that. And that is it for today's quick little sketch. I really just enjoyed getting back into the swing of things, and there was a lot of things I really liked about this piece and some things that I learned that I would like to practice more of, so that's always good. But I was gone for a little while, probably half of last week at FireCon, so I just want to give a quick thank you to everyone who did come by and said hi. That always means the world to me. I love meeting you guys, so if you ever have an opportunity to come say hi to me at a convention, I would love that. You have no idea how happy it makes me, but I do upload every Wednesdays and Saturdays, and they're all art related, and I do have a link down in the description as well as in the end card that'll take you to my art shop, and that has lots of prints and buttons and originals and general art goodies, so if you'd like to check that out, that always means so much to me, your support. But anyway, that is it for today, so I will see you guys at my next video.